Welcome to the Compliance 911 Show, a no-nonsense podcast discussing hot topics for today's busy compliance professional. It's everything you wanted to know about regulatory compliance, but we're afraid to ask. And now, here are your hosts, Dean Stockford of M&M Consulting and Len Suzio of GeoData Vision.
Dean, this week marks the end of 2025, and what a year it has been. So what interesting topic did you bring to the audience today?
Len, it's hard to believe 26 is around the corner. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you. Today, I thought I would provide kind of a recap of what we talked about in 2025.
Well, Dean, I think that's a great idea. Given everything that's occurred in 2025, I'm really looking forward to your presentation today.
Well, fantastic. My plan is not to go into details for each of our podcasts, obviously, but I plan to provide kind of just a quick summary of the areas with emphasis on some of the key areas that we covered.
That's a great idea. So, hey, let's just jump right into it.
So let me start off with just giving you kind of a glance or a picture inside. We discussed regulatory volatility with executive actions to freeze and review rules like 1071, perhaps I should say Dodd-Frank's 1071 rule, the Community Reinvestment Act, as we know. And we had several impactful podcasts addressing fair lending, which included REMA, reasonably expected market area, and redlining and data analysis impacts. We talked about operational risk like BSA, AML, know your customer, artificial intelligence risk, cybersecurity and privacy, along with third-party risk, which is something we'll see and probably speak a lot about in 2026. We discussed consumer protection with emphasis on Reg E, the error resolution process that surrounds that. And of course, we cannot forget about flood risk.
Well, that's a great peek inside some really interesting issues. I'm certain you've piqued not only my interest, but that of our audience. Let's hear what you have to say, Dean.
Well, let's unpack some of the key topics. I mean, obviously, it's been a tumultuous year for CRA and Dodd-Frank's 1071 rule, which I think gave everyone a certain level of anxiety. With CRA, we saw a proposed repeal of a very convoluted 2023 final rule, only to revert back to the 95 rule, but cautioned the bankers that they needed to get more involved to help shape the future of CRA after the notice of proposed rulemaking was issued. With 1071, we discussed the ongoing litigation, postponements of effective dates, and of course, Section 1071 is the CFPB's small business lending data collection and reporting rule intended to require certain lenders to collect and report data on credit applications from and loan originations to small business to support fair lending oversight. In a recent status report to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, the Bureau stated that after extending the 2023 Section 1071 final rules compliance dates and issuing a notice of proposed rulemaking on November 13th, it is now undertaking efforts to issue an interim final rule for the Section 1071. So I know, Len, that you have a great deal of experience in CRA and, of course, Dodd-Frank's 1071. So is there anything perhaps you could highlight or just quickly talk about relative to those areas?
Are you kidding me? You might have to cut me off. Well, regarding Section 1071, there's definitely a very, very big impact on this proposed change. Basically, we're talking about big impact in terms of the number of reporters and the volume of reported loans. In the 2023 version, there was an estimated 1,421 to 1,570 banks and savings associations and 120 credit unions that were going to be covered. It was estimated by the CFPB. In the 2025 version, we estimate only about 80 banks and 5 credit unions will be covered due to the change from the 100 to 1,000 small business loan originations as the threshold to trigger coverage. So this is a very big, humongous change. And this compares again to when we compare it to the CRA, there's about 750 CRA reporters. So Section 1071, as it's being proposed to be modified, is going to result in only a handful of lenders, fewer than 100, who are going to be subject to reporting under that rule. We also estimate that the reported small business loan activity will be less than 50% of that reported under CRA, because not only there going to be a reduced number of reporters, but also there's going to be a change in how they treat renewed loans. There's about 8.7 million loan transactions that were reported for the year 2024 under the CRA. And with the change in small business loan originations proposed in Section 1071, we're talking fewer than 4.5 million of those loans potentially would be included in Section 1071 data. And the CFPB itself estimates that 240 commercial finance companies that would have been covered under the 2023 CRA rule will be zero, that will be covered in the 2025 rule. So those are humongous changes, Dean.
I agree, and I knew you'd have something to offer on these areas given your experience, and thanks for sharing that. It kind of, in my opinion, I guess it kind of defeats the purpose of the rule itself and why it was put into place when you essentially start pulling out or modifying some of the provisions or thresholds in it. But as you can imagine, we have much more beyond just the CRA and 1071 that we just spoke about.
Oh, yeah, Dean. As you know, we've completed well over 100 podcast episodes. So I'm certain there's a few more subjects that you want to mention today.
Yeah, just a few. I mean, obviously, we try to keep this within the, anywhere from 6 to 10 minute time frame, but I'll work on it. So we
Hmm.
did speak, as I mentioned before, about BSA, anti-money laundering, know your customer, counter financing of terrorism. And in June, FinCEN issued a proposed rule to strengthen and modernize financial institutions' AML CFT programs. And these changes explicitly required that financial institutions establish, implement, and maintain effective risk-based AML CFT written program with certain minimum components to include a risk assessment process that requires the financial institution to review government-wide AML CFT priorities: corruption, cybercrime, terrorist financing, transnational criminal organizations, drug trafficking, human smuggling, proliferation financing. There will be much more to come in 26. And of course, we talk about these and hear about them all the time. So the real big one is, in my opinion, is artificial intelligence, data, and cybersecurity. I really think those will be impactful topics in 2026.
Oh, man, I totally agree with that. It just seems like every day we hear or experience some form of AI. And of course, cyber risk continues to be at an all time high. You and I just spoke a few minutes ago an expert in this area. And he talked about the trillions of dollars of transactions are being affected by this.
Yeah, and then how minimal the recovery is on the fraud that occurs. So yeah, you're right. We're going to hear a lot more about it. These areas will have significant impacts on compliance, in my opinion, in 2026. With the rapid adoption of AI-powered monitoring and model-based decisioning, we should see improved detection and efficiencies in evaluation of risk and mitigate risk for bias or fairness, especially when you're talking about fair lending. We'll also see tightening around data protection. Compliance officers should be hyper focused on controls around the storage of data, consent, incident response, and many other protocols to mitigate fraud risk and, of course, those nefarious actors that are always smarter than the rest of us in the room.
Yes. Wow. It sounds like compliance officers that, quote, sharpen the saw, as they say.
Yeah, that's for sure. For sure. I that's a quote from Stephen Covey in his leadership school. So that's a very good one. Sharpen the saw for sure. We continue to see the role of the compliance officer changing every day. So they should continue to up their game and not be complacent for sure. In addition to the key topics that I just highlighted, Third-party risk management is and will continue to be a focus of regulators as well. End-to-end life cycle, inventory due diligence, risk rating, contracting, ongoing monitoring is mandatory, including say that 5 times fast, algorithmic risk when vendors use models affecting pricing or underwriting in the fair lending process, as we discussed many times in our over 100 episodes. Another area with alarming statistics is elder financial exploitation. We haven't really seen major regulatory change, but clearly best practices to bolster detection and reporting are a must. I think flood compliance will also be discussed at length in a couple of different podcasts. As we did this last year, we had frequent violations, timing on determinations, notifications, the proof of receipt, coverage calculations when we're talking about replacement cost value or insurable value and actual cash value, contents coverage with blanket security language in security instruments, monitoring of in escrow, discipline of forced placing and timeliness around that, and of course, vetting of those private policies. In addition to those, I also discussed common errors with Reg E, electronic funds transfer rules, with an emphasis or a focus on the error resolution processes. Common failures include liability limits misapplied beyond the 60-day window, late or absent provisional crediting to allow them more time to investigate. Of course, the timeliness around the investigations, interest omissions on interest-bearing accounts that they're required to pay interest. It's a must to have these precise step action procedures in place in order to make sure that we're holding ourselves accountable, but also are following the requirements and the provisions of the rules.
Dean, you've certainly highlighted some of the various podcasts we did in 2025. I know we covered a lot of other things too. There's just so much to pack into one meeting. Is there anything else you want to add to this particular discussion?
Well, of course, I always have something else, Len, I wanted to ask. I want to leave our listeners with at least some key takeaways, seeing how I plowed through over 100 episodes of information, and we only touched on just a few of the hot topics. But if I were a risk manager or a compliance officer, I would immediately complete a compliance management system health check and prepare a memo to the president of the bank and, of course, the board that summarizes not only the challenges that we've had in 2025, but any controls that have been implemented as a result of what we experienced in 25 and some of the highlights. I'd also include in that, of course, the 2026 plan that takes into account the key risks that we mentioned today and any of the positive or negative experiences that we had in 2025.
Well, Dean, you covered a lot of important things today, but you definitely saved, I think, one of the most important things, your recommendation regarding a memo to the president and a plan for 2026. So I thank you for this important information that you did review today. This is Len Suzio from GeoData Vision.
And this is Dean Stockford from M&M Consulting saying thank you for listening to today's podcast. And please let us know of any additional topics you'd like to hear in 2026.
Thanks for listening to the Compliance 911 Show. If you like the podcast, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. While you're at it, please give us a like and review to help others find the show. As always, links are in the show notes, and you can always find us online at compliance911show.com. Follow M&M Consulting and GeoData Vision on LinkedIn for all the latest news and information on compliance hot topics.